In the merciless blizzard deep within the Wyoming forest, the fragile footsteps of two lost children echo against endless white. A little girl exhausted pounds on the door of a stranger's cabin, her small hands bleeding. Inside, a solitary man watches from the shadows, his gaze colder than the storm. But when his old German shepherd steps forward, standing guard before the children, their fates are forever bound. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on our next exciting storytelling film. The blizzard consumed everything. Snow swirled through the narrow canyons of the Wyoming backcountry, drowning the world in white. The night was supposed to be silent here, peaceful, but tonight the wind howled like a wounded thing. Trees bent beneath the crushing weight of ice. Fence lines vanished beneath drifts taller than a man. And somewhere within that endless whiteness, two small figures stumbled forward, barely visible against the storm. Lena Carter was 9 years old, but she moved like someone older. Not because she wanted to, but because she had no other choice. Her boots were 2 sizes too big. Her coat a patched, faded relic once belonging to her mother, cinched at the waist with a fraying piece of rope. Her dark hair was matted to her cheeks, frozen strands framing a face that looked far too fragile for the hunger burning in her eyes. And beside her Bean, he was only 5. The snow reached his knees. His tiny hands were raw and blue, his scarf trailing like a forgotten promise. His cheeks were streaked with tears that froze the moment they left his skin. His steps faltered more with every mile, his strength flickering like the lantern Lena carried in her heart, too dim to offer warmth, but too stubborn to go out. "Mama?" His voice cracked more breath than sound. "Mama? Where's Mama Lena?" Lena tightened her grip on his wrist, pulling him through the rising snow. Her jaw locked so tightly it hurt. Her lips parted, but no answer came. "Not now. Not here. Just keep walking." The only sound was the wind and the crunch of their broken footsteps. Bean stumbled again, falling hard into the snow. He didn't rise. Lena spun back. Her heart stopped. "No, Bean. No, you can't. You can't stop." She dropped to her knees beside him, shaking his shoulders. His little face was pale eyes fluttering like leaves. His breathing was shallow, weak. Lena knew what came next. She'd seen it before, back when their mother coughed up blood and couldn't get up anymore. She'd seen what giving up looked like, and she wasn't going to watch it happen again. "Bean." Her voice cracked, but the storm devoured it. "Bean, you hear me? You can't sleep. If you sleep, you'll never wake up. Please, please." Her throat tightened. She slapped his cheeks lightly, desperation overriding fear. Tears burned in her eyes, but froze before they could fall. "I promised, Mama. I promised I'd take care of you." His eyes fluttered open. For a moment, that was all she needed. She lifted him. He was heavier than he looked. But she'd carried more than his weight these last weeks. Debt collectors. Grief. The secret she hadn't dared tell him. Not yet. Maybe not ever. She forced herself upright. The wind slammed against her like a wall. But somewhere ahead, there had to be shelter. A town, a barn, anything. Barn. And then she saw it. Through the whiteout, a shadow. A cabin, small, isolated, half swallowed by trees and snowdrifts. Smoke trickled from the chimney like a thin, hesitant thread. Lena's body screamed to collapse. But her legs moved, obeying something deeper than muscle. She staggered toward the cabin, dragging Bean behind her. Her heart pounded. Her lungs felt torn. But she reached the front steps. She fell, hands scraped against frozen wood. She forced herself to rise, pulling Bean beside her. His weight sagged against her side. She raised her trembling fist and knocked. Nothing. She knocked harder. The sound was pitiful against the blizzard's roar. She balled her small fist and slammed it against the door. Once. Twice. Nothing. "Mister, please, somebody. Please. He's just 5. Please." Her knuckles split. Blood welled bright against the white frost. She didn't care. She kept knocking, until her strength gave out. Lena crumpled. Her body curled around Bean, shielding him with what little she had left. She pressed his face into her coat, whispering what she wanted to believe were prayers, but knew were lies. "You're gonna be okay. I promise. We're safe now. We're gonna be okay." Snow fell over them like a blanket, and still the door didn't open. But inside the cabin, a man stood in the dark, watching. Owen Miller had heard them long before the knocking began. He'd seen the shadows stumbling toward his house through the black windows, though he hadn't believed it at first. Ghosts, he thought, or worse, memories. But the knocking was real, and it wasn't stopping. He stood in silence, a figure of hollow shoulders and years worn like a second skin. His beard was grizzled, his eyes too sharp for a man who no longer cared. His house smelled of ash and old pine. The fire burned low, reluctant, and behind him something stirred, a shape in the shadows. Shadow, the German shepherd, watched his master without blinking. His ears were perked, his body tense. Owen looked at the door, then at the dog, then back. No, it was a whisper. A denial to himself, maybe. But he stayed still, until Shadow growled, low, dangerous, and moved. The dog's nails clicked against the floorboards as he strode to the door. Sat, and waited. Owen hesitated, and when the next knock came weaker this time, a knock that wasn't a knock, but the surrender of a child's last strength, Owen swore under his breath and unlatched the door. Wind exploded into the cabin, howling past him like fury incarnate. And there they were, two shapes, half buried in snow. He froze. The girl Lena looked up at him. Her face was pale lips, blue eyes, too wide, too hollow. In her arms, a boy. Tiny, limp. And Owen Miller, a man who had spent a decade avoiding every bleeding soul this world could throw at him, realized he was too late. Please, help, she breathed. And then she collapsed. Silence, except for Shadow. The dog stepped forward, slowly, cautiously, sniffed the children. Then, without waiting for his master's command, he lay down beside the boy, his massive frame curling protectively around the child's frozen body. Owen watched. He didn't move. Not yet. Not until Lena, with what might have been the last ounce of strength she owned, reached out and, without opening her eyes, grabbed the dog's fur. She whispered, "Don't leave us, too." Shadow stayed. Owen swallowed. His knuckles whitened around the doorframe. And then, against every instinct he had trained himself to obey, he stepped outside and lifted them, both of them. The girl's body was feather-light, terrifyingly so. The boy weighed even less. Owen Miller carried them inside and shut the door behind him. The storm raged against the cabin walls, but for the first time in years, Owen Miller let it rage without him. Inside the cabin, warmth felt like an accusation. Owen Miller moved stiffly, as if each step cost him something. His body was that of a man who had once been strong, but had let strength decay. His shoulders sagged beneath an old flannel jacket frayed at the cuffs. His beard was more salt than pepper now. And his eyes, those pale, distant eyes, carried the kind of emptiness that doesn't come from losing a battle. It came from surviving it. Shadow paced beside him, claws ticking across worn wooden floors. The German shepherd's hackles were half raised, but not out of anger. Alertness, wariness. His deep amber gaze flicked between the two children Owen had laid near the hearth, their small forms limp, half-conscious. Owen watched the dog, then the kids, his jaw clenched. "You think I'm doing the right thing, don't you?" His voice cracked from disuse. Shadow didn't answer, but his body did. The shepherd moved closer to the boy, the littlest one, and lay down at his side again, curling around him protectively. Owen exhaled through his nose, slow, bitter. Damn dog. He turned away. The kettle on the iron stove was hissing quietly. He reached for it out of habit, poured hot water into a chipped mug, stared at the steam. His mind was racing in ways he hated. Two kids, no older than, no. He didn't let himself finish the thought. Not my problem. But he didn't believe himself. Behind him a cough, a ragged, shallow thing. Not from the boy, from the girl. Owen pivoted. Her body twitched weakly near the hearth. She was still conscious. Barely. Her cracked lips parted, trying to form words, but none came. She was awake enough to be terrified. His mouth tightened. Hell! He crouched beside her. Her eyes fluttered open. Blue, sharp, but glazed over. Her gaze darted around the cabin, wild and untrusting. She tried to shrink back, but there was nowhere left to go. Her hands clutched something. Owen frowned. What's that? No answer, but her fingers tightened. Owen reached out, not to take it, just to steady her. She flinched violently. Owen froze. Okay, not touching. His voice wasn't gentle, just tired. She stared at him, hollow-eyed, her knuckles white around the object in her grip. A postcard. Owen saw it now, worn, water-stained, creased 1,000 times over. The girl dragged it closer to her chest, as if it could shield her from him. Owen backed off. Behind him, Shadow let out a low, almost reproachful growl. Not threatening. Not directed at the children. Directed at him. Owen stood, paced. He couldn't think. Not clearly. He had rules. Keep the door locked. Don't answer knocks. Don't talk to people who aren't necessary. And never ever let anyone inside. It was the only way he'd survived. Now 2 strangers, 2 children no less, were melting snow all over his floor. He looked down at his boots. His own floorboards felt unfamiliar now. Shadow shifted behind him, protective, loyal, foolish. Owen's throat worked. He looked back at the kids. The boy was unconscious but breathing better. The dog had seen to that. The girl, she was watching him, not pleading, wary, like a cornered animal waiting for a blow. Owen hated that look, because he'd seen it before. In the mirror, he crouched again, slower this time, careful not to get too close. What's your name? He rasped. Silence. Then, Lena. It was barely audible, but it hit him harder than a bullet. "Lena." He nodded once.
"You."
She blinked in confusion. "Your brother. What's his name?" Her lips quivered. "Bean." "Bean." She nodded. Owen rubbed a hand across his beard. He stared at the boy's small frame, at the dog curled beside him, at the girl clutching her postcard like it could save her. His heart long ago rusted shut, twisted. He didn't like it, didn't want it, but there it was. "You hungry?" Lena didn't answer. Not with words. Her stomach did. A sharp, brittle growl that filled the cabin like a gunshot. She winced in shame. Owen stood, moved to the shelf, found the tin of powdered soup mix, poured water, stirred. He worked in silence, every motion mechanical. He heard Lena shift behind him, small, cautious movements. She was testing him, trying to decide if he was a threat. He didn't blame her. He stirred harder. Minutes passed. Finally, he ladled the weak broth into 2 mismatched mugs. He carried them over, set them down near the hearth, not too close, not offering, just placing. Then he sat back, cross-legged on the floor. "I can't make you drink it." Lena hesitated. Her eyes flicked from Owen to Shadow to Bean. Then she reached, slow. She took 1 mug, drank. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Owen watched her shoulders relax. Just a fraction. She looked at him once, just once, then back to her brother. She reached for the 2nd mug and set it in front of Bean. His lips were cracked, his skin pale. He was unconscious, but Lena lifted his head gently and dripped the broth into his mouth. Tiny drops. Patient, endlessly patient. Owen watched her hands shake. Her tears didn't fall. They froze in her lashes. He forced himself to look away. He couldn't afford to care. Couldn't, but he spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm not your savior." Lena looked up, confused. "Hollow." Owen's fists tightened on his knees. "I don't save people anymore." The words were acid. He didn't know if he was telling her or reminding himself. But it didn't matter. Shadow looked up at him and didn't believe a word. Owen stood abruptly. His body jolted from the floor like something burned him. He paced to the window, peered out. White, endless. He could feel the storm outside, feel it pressing against the cabin walls. But it wasn't the storm that worried him. It was what came after. People, questions, consequences. He couldn't handle that. Not again. Behind him, Lena shifted. He felt it. She was watching him. Owen Miller, once a soldier, once a husband, once a father. Now nothing. Nothing but regret in human shape. And 2 starving kids on his floor. "Damn it," he whispered. He heard the clink of the mug as Lena set it down. Then her voice. Small, broken, but there. "Why? Did you open the door?" Owen froze. The question wasn't accusing. It wasn't grateful either. It was honest. She wanted to know. Owen didn't answer. For a long time. Then without turning, he said, "Because the dog wouldn't let me close it." Silence. Then Lena's voice again. Softer. "Thank you." Owen's eyes burned. He didn't know why. He stayed at the window, staring out, wishing the snow would bury them all. Behind him, Shadow stood slowly, moved beside Lena. The dog lay down once more, but this time, his body pressed against her back. Warmth. Lena leaned into him. For the first time, her breathing slowed. She closed her eyes. Sleep. Not safe. But surrender. Owen listened to her breathing, to the crackle of the weak fire, to the wind clawing at his door. And he whispered one last thing. Not to her, not to the dog, to himself. "I can't save them." But the words sounded like a lie. And Owen Miller had told himself enough lies to know the difference. Morning inside Owen Miller's cabin wasn't really morning at all. Not in the way Lena remembered. No smell of pancakes. No mother humming by the stove, just silence. Heavy as the snow pressing against the door, and the bitter scent of black coffee. She sat cross-legged near the hearth, her body hunched protectively over Beans. Her little brother still sleeping nestled against Shadow's side like he'd belonged there all along. His tiny hand was buried deep in the shepherd's thick fur. His breath slow but steady, cheeks no longer blue. Lena didn't dare move. Every noise seemed louder in this house of strangers. Owen stood by the stove, back turned, hands steady as stone. She watched him work. Coffee grounds, scalding water, an old tin kettle that hissed in complaint as steam hissed upwards. Lena's gaze drifted higher, to the mantel, a photograph. She wasn't supposed to look, but she couldn't stop. A boy, maybe 6, smiling crookedly, a missing front tooth like Beans, holding a battered baseball glove too big for his hand, standing next to a younger, leaner version of Owen. The father's hand rested heavy on the boy's shoulder. The boy's name wasn't written anywhere, but Lena knew that boy wasn't here anymore, and Owen wasn't the same man. She looked away before Owen noticed, but it was too late. He already knew. The sound of his breath shifted. "Coffee's hot," he said flatly. Not an offer, a fact. Lena didn't respond. Her voice had been used up the night before. Instead, she tightened her grip around Bean. The boy whimpered faintly in his sleep. Shadow stirred tail thumping once, before settling again. Lena laid a hand on Shadow's back, warm, alive, real, unlike everything else in her world. She could feel Bean trembling even in sleep, his small body still fighting off the cold that had wrapped around him for too many nights. "He's safe." The voice startled her. Owen hadn't moved. but the words felt like something cracked open. He'll wake up. Lena flinched. She wasn't sure if it was meant to comfort her or himself. Minutes passed. Owen poured coffee into a single metal cup. Drank it black. His face didn't change. He watched the window, though. Nothing lay beyond but the white blur of Storm, a prisoner in his own house. Lena watched him, then whispered, her voice so small it hurt. "Thank you." Owen said nothing. Lena buried her face in Bean's hair. She hated this. The helplessness. The pretending. She hated how Bean still didn't know the truth. Didn't know their mother wasn't coming back. That she never would. Lena glanced toward the door, but there was nowhere left to run. Not now. Her hands trembled. She bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. She needed to tell someone, but not Owen. Not yet. Instead, she leaned closer to Shadow. The dog's steady breathing calmed her, fur soft beneath her fingertips, and she whispered. Words she hadn't said aloud to anyone. "Shadow, Mama's dead." The words splintered. I didn't tell Bean. Her voice cracked. He still thinks she's just gone to the hospital. A breath. Her whole body shook. I couldn't say it. Not to him. She pressed her forehead into Shadow's neck. I didn't want him to break. Silent tears pooled beneath her lashes. Shadow didn't move, but his body curled tighter around her, like he understood. Maybe he did, because Lena felt safe enough for the first time in weeks not to pretend. She cried, silent, bitter. The kind of crying that didn't ask for comfort, but she wasn't alone. And that mattered. Owen heard all of it. Every word. He gripped his coffee tighter. He didn't turn. He didn't speak. Because he knew there were no words. Not for this. And for the first time he realized this wasn't just another set of strangers on his floor. This wasn't just another tragedy to ignore. This was a girl who had fought harder than he'd ever asked of himself. And lost. Yet somehow she still held her brother together with her bare hands. Owen understood that. Because once long ago he'd tried to do the same. Before the desert. Before the letters. Before the grave marker he'd never visited. He swallowed hard. Coffee scalded his throat, but he drank it anyway. Because pain felt easier than remembering. When he finally turned, Lena was asleep, face buried in Shadow's fur. Bean pressed against her side, both children breathing in rhythm with the dog, their fragile world balanced on the body heat of an old shepherd. Owen watched them, then crossed the room, silently. Carefully, he retrieved a second blanket from the chest beneath the window, hesitated, then draped it over them, not for their sake. At least that's what he told himself. For the dog. Shadow was loyal. He'd earned it. Owen stepped back, watched, listened, felt something in his chest shift. He didn't know what it was, didn't want to know, but it was there. He returned to the stove, refilled his mug, watched the snow rage against the windows. Time passed. Hours, maybe minutes. He wasn't sure anymore. He barely noticed when the children stirred. Lena woke first, eyes snapping open, body stiffening, breath catching. Owen saw the panic before she could hide it. She looked at him, then at the blanket. Her face crumpled, but she said nothing. Neither did he. The silence between them felt safer. Bean woke slower, a soft murmur, a small uncertain cough. "Lena." The boy's voice was thick, his throat raw, but he was awake, alive. Lena pulled him close. "It's okay," she whispered, forcing steadiness she didn't feel. "You're okay. You're safe." Bean blinked at her, then at Shadow, a tiny crooked smile. "Doggy." Shadow licked his cheek. The boy giggled weakly. Lena cried, but only in her eyes. Bean clung to her. "Where's Mama?" Lena froze. Her arms tightened, her mouth opened, but no words came. Owen watched. The war inside her was visible. She couldn't say it. Not now. Not yet. So she lied. Later. It broke her. But she smiled for Bean's sake. "Just sleep okay?" Bean nodded. Too tired to fight. He rested against her, eyes fluttering shut. Safe. For now. Owen turned away. Not out of respect, but shame. Because he knew what it was to bury the truth to protect someone who couldn't handle it. And he hated that he understood. Coffee burned his throat again. He didn't care. Lena laid Bean down gently, stroked his hair, then looked up. Her voice was hoarse. "Why are you helping us?" Owen stiffened. Didn't turn. "I'm not. You gave us the blanket." He said nothing. "You let us stay." Still nothing. Lena pressed. "Why?" Owen's voice when it came was dead. "Because I couldn't watch you die." Silence. "I've watched enough people die." Lena's lip trembled. Owen hated himself for saying it. He poured more coffee, because if he spoke again, he'd tell her things no child should hear. Lena pressed her hand to her pocket. The postcard. Her mother's face. A memory she couldn't let Bean see. She pressed it flat beneath her palm, as if trying to keep it from crumbling like the rest of her world. Owen saw, but said nothing. Instead, he whispered to himself. A sentence so soft, he wasn't sure if he'd said it at all. They deserve better. And for the first time, the cabin felt less like a cage, and more like a choice. The storm hadn't ended, but in Fairview, storms weren't just made of snow. They started in whispers. And on this morning, as the blizzard softened and the sun clawed weakly at the ice-slick streets, whispers moved faster than the thaw. 2 children, strangers, up at Owen Miller's cabin. Someone had seen them. Someone always saw. The first word came from the Daniels boy, half frozen, trailing back into town from his failed hunt, up past the ridge. I saw tracks, he said. Small ones. Kids, maybe. People had scoffed. At first, then others spoke. The widow Harper swore she'd glimpsed shapes near Miller's property. A shadow in the trees. Too small to be deer. Too slow to be wolves. In Fairview, where nothing ever changed, strangers were a reason to worry. Children most of all, because no one ran in winter without running from something. By mid-morning, the general store buzzed like a hive. Shepherd Miller's got something up there. 2 somethings. And you know what he's like. Never talks to anyone. Why now? What's he hiding? In the corner, sipping day-old coffee, Deputy Alan Price listened. He said nothing, but his fingers tapped against his cup. Rhythmic. Measured. By noon, the rumors had teeth. Trespassers. Fugitives. Maybe worse. By the time they reached the mayor's office, the story had curdled. Owen Miller's hiding criminals. Children had become a detail. Deputy Price stood in silence as the mayor, sweating behind his desk, signed the paperwork. An investigation. Official. Not that Price needed orders. He already knew where the wind blew. Sheriff Grayson had seen to that. The man's name was enough to make honest folk lower their voices. Because Sheriff Adam Grayson didn't just keep order. He controlled it. Years ago, when he'd first worn the badge, folks had believed in him. A war hero. A lawman. A father. But Fairview had learned, and learned the hard way. Power suited Grayson too well. His methods were efficient. His results unquestionable. His conscience optional. And now when whispers reached him of 2 lost children, his stepchildren wandering the back roads, the rumors didn't stir concern. They stirred fury. Behind closed doors inside the sheriff's office, Grayson listened to the report. 2 kids, a girl about 9, a boy younger, last seen near Miller's cabin. His knuckles whitened around the report. Lena, he spat the name like a curse. She's alive. That wasn't part of the plan. She wasn't supposed to survive the fire. Bean, perhaps. The boy was useless. But Lena, she remembered. Grayson stood slowly. The office felt smaller when he moved. His frame filled the space. His breath was calm. His eyes weren't. He crushed the report in one gloved fist, then turned to Price. Find them. Price hesitated. Sir, the snow. It's heavy up there. I didn't ask about the weather. Price swallowed. I'll need men. No. Grayson's voice was flat. Too many eyes. A beat. Handle it. Price didn't move. Didn't argue. Didn't agree. He just nodded. And left. Outside, the snow fell soft as ash. Price pulled his coat tighter. He hated this job. Always had. But in Fairview, you didn't say no to Adam Grayson. Not if you wanted to stay breathing. Behind him, inside that office, Grayson watched the snow drift against the window pane. In his mind, he saw Lena's face, her mother's eyes. He'd warned her, warned them both. No one ran from him. No one escaped. Not for long. This wasn't personal. It was control. Control he refused to lose. He poured himself a drink, waited. And in the hills above where the blizzard howled around Owen Miller's cabin, 2 children slept. Oblivious, but their time was running out. In the center of town, the rumors boiled over. At Hazelwick's diner, words stabbed sharper than cutlery. Owen Miller, a man folks had feared, pitied, and forgotten in equal measure. Now he was the center of every conversation. What's he thinking? He ain't thinking. He's hiding someone. Those kids ain't his. So whose are they? Eyes darted. The answer hung silent. Everyone thought it. No one said it. Runaways, or worse. People wanted answers. But no one wanted to climb the ridge to ask. Except one, Ruth Mallory, the town nurse. She watched the storm from her clinic window. Watched people pretend they weren't scared. And remembered, years ago when her husband died under the mountain's weight, Owen Miller had been the only man who didn't offer false condolences. He'd offered silence. It had meant more. Now he needed someone to do the same. And Ruth had never been afraid of storms. She pulled on her boots and headed toward the ridge. Because the town could whisper all it wanted. She needed truth, and she knew where to find it. Meanwhile, Grayson's orders moved like poison. Deputy Price reached the edge of the tree line by dusk. He didn't knock, didn't call out. He watched the cabin from the shadows, watched smoke curl from the chimney, watched movement flicker in the windows, and thought of Lena, a girl too brave for her own good. A girl who should have died when her mother did, but hadn't. Price's jaw tightened. Inside the cabin, life carried on in fragile silence. Lena fed Bean with trembling hands. Shadow slept beside them. And Owen Miller, he sat in the dark, eyes open, listening, because even a man who'd buried himself alive knew when the storm outside wasn't made of snow. It was made of people, and it was coming. The letter sat on the table like a loaded gun. Owen Miller hadn't touched it in hours. He didn't need to. The words were burned into his mind. Notice of protective custody request. 2 unidentified minors believed endangered. Immediate surrender required for their safety. Owen knew what that meant. He knew who had written it, and he knew what would happen if he obeyed. The cabin walls felt thinner. The wind outside louder. The fire that should have offered warmth now spat shadows across the room, cracking over the silence. Owen sat at the table, hands locked, eyes hollow. He wasn't a man given to panic, not anymore. But tonight he wasn't sure who he was. A soldier, a recluse, a coward, or worse. Someone about to become a traitor to the only 2 souls who trusted him. Behind him, Lena moved softly. She thought he wasn't listening, but every sound she made was a knife. She sat near the hearth, Bean curled in her lap like a fragile animal. His face pale, his breath weak, but alive. Because of her, because of the choices Owen was now being asked to undo. He heard her whisper, not to him, not even to Bean, to herself. A prayer, a promise, a curse. Just once. Her voice cracked. Just this one time, please. Let me keep him safe. Owen's throat tightened. She pressed her lips to Bean's forehead. I'll protect you, Beanie. I swear. Even if it breaks me. Shadow watched from the doorway, silent. Still, but Owen could feel the tension in the dog's body. Every muscle coiled, every breath deliberate. The shepherd wasn't sleeping tonight. Neither was Owen. Not with what waited outside. Not with what waited inside himself. Because the worst part wasn't the letter. It wasn't the threat of lawmen coming up the ridge. It was the fact that for one brief flickering second, Owen had considered obeying. Not out of cruelty, but out of fear. He told himself it was for the kids, for their safety, for the life they deserved. But deep down, he knew better. He was afraid. Of failing them. Of trusting himself. Of being what he'd once been. A protector. And failing again. The letter stayed on the table. Like a verdict waiting to be signed. Lena's whispers reached him again. Softer. Worse. I'm sorry, Mama. I'm trying. Owen stood. Too fast. The chair skidded backward. Shadow snapped his head toward him, eyes sharp. Lena flinched. Owen cursed under his breath. Go to sleep. His voice was rougher than he meant. Lena's arms tightened around Bean. I'm not tired. You need to be. I can't. Neither can I, Owen almost said. But he swallowed the truth. Instead he turned, faced the window. The storm had slowed, but the darkness beyond pressed against the glass like something alive. He felt it in his bones. Pressure. Weight. Inevitable. Shadow moved, padded silently to the door, sat, and waited. Owen watched him. The old shepherd's posture was rigid. Guarding. Expecting. Owen shook his head. You're not a guard dog. Shadow didn't move. Didn't blink. And Owen realized he was wrong. Tonight, Shadow was exactly that. A reluctant sentinel. Because even a dog knew when a battle was coming. Owen's fists clenched. He turned back to Lena. She wasn't crying. She was too used to fear for tears now. Her eyes, sharp exhausted, tracked him like prey. Are you sending us back? Her voice shattered him. He answered too fast. No. Her eyes narrowed. But you thought about it. Owen said nothing. The silence condemned him. Lena looked down, stroked Bean's hair. He's just 5. I know. He didn't do anything. I know. We're not dangerous. Owen flinched. I know that. Then why are you scared of us? The words hit harder than he expected. Because they were true. Owen sat back down. But not near her. Not near the kids. At the table, where the letter still waited. I'm not scared of you. Then what? Owen's voice broke. Of myself. Lena didn't understand. But she understood enough. She held Bean tighter. Owen closed his eyes. He thought of the boy in the photograph. Of the flag folded in a box upstairs. Of the day the letter arrived, telling him he wasn't a father anymore. And now 2 strangers were asking him to be one again. He couldn't, but he also couldn't let them die. Shadow shifted near the door. Owen looked at the dog. At the only soul that had stayed beside him after the world ended. Do I save them? Shadow's ears flicked. No answer. Just waiting, Owen whispered to himself. I can't save anyone. The cabin disagreed. Because outside in the dark, the first footsteps crunched against snow. Deputy Price. And he wasn't alone. The storm wasn't the only thing that had reached Owen's door. Snow crunched softly beneath the boy's small boots. Bean moved with uncertain steps across the frozen yard. His legs wobbling with exhaustion more than fear. Each step left a fragile imprint in the snow, like he might disappear if the wind came too strong. But he wasn't alone. Beside him, steady as the earth, walked Shadow. The shepherd's pace matched Bean's exactly. Slow, patient. Every time Bean faltered, Shadow paused, waited, then moved forward again as if saying, You can do this. I'm here. Owen Miller watched from the porch. He didn't speak. He barely breathed. There was no part of this that made sense to him. No reason the boy should trust a stranger's dog more than the man who fed him. No logic to explain why Shadow, a creature trained for hurting, not healing, had become the child's anchor. But it was happening, and Owen couldn't look away. Bean stumbled. A gasp escaped him, thin and frightened. But Shadow didn't flinch. The dog stopped, turned, waited. Bean reached out instinctively. His little hand sank into the thick fur at Shadow's neck, and steadied. Shadow pressed forward, slow and gentle, and Bean followed. Owen's throat closed. Lena stood nearby, arms crossed tightly against herself. She didn't call to Bean. She didn't interfere. Her eyes flickered between terror and wonder. She understood. This wasn't her job now. This was Shadow's. And the boy who refused to speak at night, who woke up crying, who clung to his sister like she was oxygen, was now walking. Because of a dog. Owen had seen a lot of miracles in his life. None of them looked like this. Bean's steps reached the edge of the yard. He stopped. He looked up. The sun cracked through the clouds for just a moment, spilling gold over the snowdrifts. And Bean smiled. A real smile. Small, tired, but real. Owen's eyes burned. He looked away too late. Lena saw. She said nothing. Bean crouched beside Shadow now. his small hands moving over the shepherd's ears, the back of his neck. Fingers tracing the scars and thick fur like they were reading a map. Then, with the trust only a child could give, he hugged him, tight. Shadow stayed perfectly still and accepted. Owen stepped off the porch. His boots crushed the snow louder than he wanted. He reached them slowly. Bean looked up. For the first time in days, there was no fear in his eyes, only the quiet question of what came next. Owen knelt. Cold. Bean nodded softly. Owen opened his arms. The boy hesitated, then leaned forward. Into the warmth, Owen felt the tiny body collapse against his chest, felt the fragile heartbeat, and broke. His hands shook as he wrapped the boy inside his flannel jacket, tucking Bean close to his chest. "I've got you," he whispered. "I've got you." Bean's small fingers curled against the fabric. Shadow sat beside them, a silent guardian. Owen didn't stand. Not yet. He just knelt in the snow the boy pressed against him and felt something he hadn't let himself feel in years. Hope. Lena approached quietly. Her voice was thin, like she was afraid saying the words too loud would shatter the moment. "He trusts you now." Owen looked up. His voice cracked. "No, he trusts the dog." Lena managed a small smile. "That's enough." Owen nodded. "Yeah." He stood carefully carrying Bean. The boy's head rested against his shoulder, eyes closed. "Safe." Owen looked at Shadow. The dog met his gaze. Silent. Steady. Loyal. "Come on, old friend." Shadow followed. That night after supper, the cabin felt different. Lena had fallen asleep first, exhaustion pulling her down hard. She lay curled beside the hearth, her chest rising and falling softly beneath the old wool blanket Owen had found in the cedar chest. Owen sat in the rocking chair. Bean was in his lap. The boy had refused to sleep anywhere else. Owen didn't argue. He simply let the child rest against him, let the weight settle, let the heartbeat steady his own. Across the room, Shadow lay near the door. His body relaxed, his eyes half closed but still watching. Guarding. Owen ran a hand absently down Bean's back. The boy's breath hitched once, then evened, and Owen whispered so quiet he wasn't sure it was real. "You remind me of him." Bean stirred. Owen swallowed. "He was your age." He blinked hard, staring into the flames. "Tommy." The name hurt, but he said it anyway. "My boy's name was Tommy." Shadow's ears flicked. Owen kept talking. 6 years old. Smart. Brave. Scared of thunderstorms. Used to crawl in our bed every time lightning cracked. Said he wasn't scared, just checking on the grown-ups. He laughed once hollow. Bean shifted against him. Owen stared at the fire. "I was deployed when it happened. Overseas. Didn't even get to bury him." The words clawed their way out. "My wife never forgave me." He looked down at Bean. "At first, neither did I." The boy didn't stir. Owen stroked his hair gently. "I came back to a house that didn't feel like home." He breathed shakily. "Now I live in one that isn't." Silence. Shadow's tail thumped once against the floor. Owen laughed softly. "Except for you." He looked at the shepherd. "At least you stayed." Shadow met his gaze without judgment, without pity, just presence. And in that silence, something Owen thought long dead stirred. He looked at the boy, at the fragile sleeping life against his chest. And for the first time in years, the weight in his chest lifted. Not completely, but enough to let him hope. Just a little. He pressed a kiss to Bean's hair. Soft, careful, and let the boy sleep. Later, Owen moved carefully. He laid Bean beside Lena, tucking him gently under the blanket. The children curled toward each other instinctively, a silent, fragile bond. Owen watched them. His throat ached. He turned, moved toward the door. Shadow stood. Owen hesitated. Looked down. "You're not just a dog, are you?" Shadow blinked. Owen shook his head. "No, didn't think so." The shepherd padded after him. Owen stepped onto the porch. The sky had cleared. Stars burned sharp and brittle above the snowdrifts. Owen stood in the cold, breathed, and for the first time in too long, he whispered a prayer. Not for himself, but for them. Inside the cabin was warm, safe, for tonight. The first peaceful night after too many lost. And behind him, in the shadows of the doorway, Shadow watched over them all. It happened after midnight. Owen Miller sat by the fire, staring at nothing when the whisper came. "I lied?" Lena's voice. Small, torn. He didn't move, didn't look, didn't answer. But he listened. Behind him, Lena sat on the floor, legs crossed tightly, arms wrapped around herself, as if her own bones were all she had left. She didn't look at him. Her eyes burned holes in the floor. "I said Mama died? From sickness?" She shook her head. "No." The confession hung there. Owen's throat tightened. He looked down at his calloused hands. Hands that had once held rifles, built fences, buried caskets. Now they just trembled. Lena's next words cracked the cabin in half. "He killed her." Silence. Shattering. Owen's breath left him. "He poisoned her." Her voice wavered. "Drowned. My stepfather." Owen turned slowly. She didn't stop. He made her tea, said it would help. She drank it. Lena's hands dug into her knees. "She died the next morning." Her chest heaved. "I saw him. I saw the bottle. I saw him pour it in." She finally looked up, and Owen saw the thing no child should ever carry. Survivor's guilt. "I didn't stop him." Owen knelt in front of her. "Not close, but enough. You were a child." "I still am." Her voice cracked. "And now he's hunting us." Owen's pulse spiked. "What?" Lena wiped her face, furious with herself. "I couldn't tell Bean." He thinks she's still sick in some hospital. Her lips quivered. I didn't want him to know. We're running from him. Her voice splintered. From the man who was supposed to protect us. Owen closed his eyes and understood. Because once he'd believed in protectors too and watched them fail. Who is he? Lena's voice was barely a breath. Sheriff Grayson. Owen's body went cold. The room felt smaller. Your stepfather is the sheriff? Lena nodded. He's looking for us. She shook her head. No, not looking. Her eyes darkened. Hunting. Owen tasted bile. A lawman. That changed everything. Or maybe it changed nothing. Because in this world, uniforms didn't always mean safety. Owen stood, paced, his breathing ragged, and Lena watched, terrified not of him, but of what he might say next, what he might decide. He could turn them in. The world would believe the badge, not the broken girl. He stopped, stared at the door. Shadow lay there, silent, watching, like he knew what had to happen. Owen's voice broke. Why tell me now? Lena's answer was instant. Because it was true. Because if I die tonight, someone should know. Owen's knees buckled, but he didn't fall. Instead, he crossed to the door, bolted it, latched every lock, turned back to her. And for the first time, Lena saw not a man who'd given up, but a soldier, a father, a protector. You're not dying tonight. Lena's face crumpled. Why not? Owen's voice was steel. Because I say so. Shadow stood, moved to Owen's side. The unspoken vow between man and dog. Owen pointed to the hearth. You keep your brother warm. He stepped closer. You keep him safe. His eyes burned. And I'll keep both of you alive, Lena whispered. Why? Owen didn't blink. Because someone failed my boy. He swallowed. I'm not failing yours. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, for the first time since the children arrived, Lena believed she might survive. Because Owen Miller had just chosen a side. And it was hers. It started with silence. Not the safe kind, the heavy waiting kind. The kind that comes before something breaks. Owen Miller knew that silence. He stood at the window, his breath fogging the frost-crusted glass. The trees beyond the clearing looked wrong. Too still, too quiet. As if the whole forest held its breath. Then he saw it, a flicker of movement, a glint of metal between the pines. Binoculars, another flash. Boots in snow, figures, shadows shifting where no shadows should be. He'd seen this before, not here, not in Wyoming, but years ago in a country too dry to snow. An ambush. His voice was calm, too calm. Lena. She flinched. Owen turned, not raising his voice. Wake being, quietly, stay low. She hesitated, then obeyed. Owen crossed the room, pulled the rifle from beneath the floorboards. His hands didn't shake. Not yet. Outside, the noose tightened. Grayson's men moved efficiently, like hunters. 6 in total. Deputy Price among them. His face pale, his jaw clenched. And leading them? Sheriff Grayson. He stood at the edge of the tree line, his breath steady, his eyes colder than the snow at his feet. You'll give me those kids, Miller. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. You'll do it now. Owen heard him, but he wasn't listening. Inside the cabin, Lena held Bean against her chest. The boy whimpered softly. What's happening, Lena? Shh. She pressed his face into her shoulder. It's okay. Just stay with me. But her eyes told the truth. It wasn't okay. And for the first time, Lena didn't know if she could save him. Owen moved like a machine. Checked the rifle. Loaded the chamber. Every click sounded too loud. He caught Lena watching. Her voice cracked. Are you going to hurt them? Owen's answer was steady. I'm going to stop them. Her lip trembled. Can you? Owen met her gaze and said the only thing he believed. I have to. Lena didn't argue. She just whispered, please. Owen stepped to the door, then froze. A small hand grabbed his jacket. Lena. She stood between him and the door now, her whole body shaking. But she looked up at him and whispered words that splintered his heart. Please, don't leave us. Her hand pressed against his chest, over his heart. Owen stood motionless. Her hand was tiny, fragile, but her touch felt heavier than the rifle in his arms. He couldn't speak. Not yet. She begged him again. Please, Uncle Owen. Not sir, not Mr. Miller, not even Owen, but uncle, a word that made him part of something. Family. Owen swallowed hard. I'm not leaving. His voice cracked. I promise. Shadow stood beside them now, silent, alert. Owen looked down at the dog who'd carried him through grief and realized he wasn't alone anymore. Time to work, old friend. Shadow's ears flicked. Owen opened the door. Snow lashed his face, but he didn't flinch. From the tree line, Grayson watched, waited until Owen stepped into the open. Then calmly, Grayson raised his voice. Last chance, Miller? Owen raised the rifle. Not aimed. Not yet, but pointed. I'm not surrendering them. His voice rang clear. Grayson's lip curled. You protecting criminals now. I'm protecting children. They're mine. Owen's voice turned to steel. Not anymore. Grayson nodded once, then signaled his men. Owen heard the boots crunch forward. 4. No 5 now. Trying to flank. He tightened his grip. Then slowly, deliberately, he raised the rifle to the sky and fired. A single shot. Thunder cracked the frozen silence. Snow exploded from the treetops, and everything stopped. The first shot Owen Miller had fired in 10 years. A warning, a promise. Grayson didn't move. Neither did Owen. 2 men, 2 ghosts, staring at each other across the frozen earth. And in that moment, Owen knew This wasn't war. It was worse. Because this time, it was personal. Behind him, Lena crouched in the snow, her hand still pressed to her heart. Inside the cabin, Bean clung to Shadow's fur, whispering into his neck. And Owen stood alone, guarding the only family he had left. Ready to die, but not to surrender. Not tonight. The world outside the cabin had gone still, but inside Owen Miller, a war raged louder than any gunfire. He stood by the door, back pressed against splintered wood rifle, shaking in his hands. His breath came in harsh, uneven gasps. Snow clung to his beard, melting into cold rivulets down his neck. His body remembered war. His mind remembered death. And now the weight pressing on his chest wasn't combat. It was choice. Give them up, Miller. Grayson's voice bled through the door. Calm. Absolute. You know it's the right thing. Owen's stomach churned. The right thing. That word used to mean something. Before medals, before folded flags, before funerals he'd missed. Children don't run without reason. Grayson called again. You know that. You know what they are, what they're worth. Owen gritted his teeth. He knew exactly what Lena and Bean were worth. Everything, but his body refused to move. His past held him prisoner. Behind him, near the hearth, Lena crouched protectively over Bean. She wasn't crying anymore. She'd gone past that. Her face was frozen in terror and exhaustion. But her eyes still burned. She watched him, waiting, begging, not with words, with hope. That terrified Owen more than the rifles outside, because he didn't trust himself to deserve it. You have 5 minutes, Grayson called. Then we're coming in. Silence fell again, the kind before the breaking. Owen's knees threatened to buckle. The rifle sagged. Then he heard it, a sound behind him, soft, measured, claws on wooden floor. Shadow. The old shepherd moved between Owen and the children, not growling, not bristling, just standing, guarding. Owen turned bewildered. Shadow. But the dog didn't look at him. He looked forward, at the door, at the threat, and refused to move. Owen staggered back a step. No, boy, you're not. His voice cracked. You're not supposed to do that. But Shadow ignored him. Lena watched. Her voice broke for the first time in hours. He's protecting us. Owen's heart twisted. He shook his head. He's just a dog. But he couldn't believe that anymore. Not when Shadow stood taller than Owen had ever seen him. Not when the shepherd planted himself between the rifle and the children, as if daring Owen to decide who mattered more. Owen's hands trembled violently. Shadow. But the old dog didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't hesitate. Lena's voice pierced the silence. Why's he doing that? Owen's throat worked. He looked at her and saw the answer. Because somewhere, somehow, Shadow had understood what Owen hadn't. Family isn't blood. It's choice. And Shadow had made his. Owen's knees hit the floor. The rifle clattered from his hands. His breath shattered in his lungs. I don't know how to do this. He wasn't speaking to Lena, or even to Shadow. He was speaking to ghosts, to the boy he'd buried, to the woman who'd stopped waiting for him. I don't know how to save them. Lena crawled forward. Bean stirred weakly in her lap, eyes glassy with fear. But she looked at Owen like he was her last lifeline. Then don't save us. Her voice was steady now. Just stay. Owen looked up. Stay. She nodded. Be here. With us, please. And that word, please, cut deeper than any bullet. Owen forced himself to his feet. Not for war, but for them. Shadow stepped aside. Not because the threat was gone, but because the choice had been made. Owen reached down, picked up the rifle. But this time, it wasn't to run. It was to fight. Not against the past, but for the future. For Lena. For Bean. For the family he hadn't chosen, but who had chosen him. Outside, Grayson barked orders. Boots crunched in the snow. The 5 minutes were over. But inside the cabin, something far older than fear now stood ready. Owen Miller, and the old shepherd who had taught him what family really meant. Tonight no one was getting through that door. Not without a fight. The decision was made in silence. Owen stood by the door, heart pounding like a war drum, snow seeping through every crack in the old cabin walls. His knuckles were white around the rifle, but he wasn't looking at the gun anymore. He was looking at Lena, at Bean, at Shadow. And he knew. They couldn't stay. We're leaving. His voice was low, final. Lena's eyes widened, but no more but. No more hiding. He crossed the room, grabbed the small pack he kept near the stove, a relic from when he thought life still held plans. Coats, blankets, whatever fits. Lena hesitated only a second, then moved. Instinct took over. She bundled Bean tight, whispering calming lies, promises even she didn't believe. His face pressed to her shoulder, terrified tears soaking through her sweater. Owen tied knots with shaking hands. Every second felt stolen. Outside, Grayson's men circled closer. Owen knew their rhythm, their formation. They were almost in position, almost ready to storm the house. He looked down, at the old scarred dog at his feet. Shadow watched him. Steady, unflinching. Guard them, Owen whispered. And Shadow understood. He always did. Owen slammed the bolt back on his rifle, then kicked the door open. Blizzard whines howled inside like a living thing. Go, he barked. Lena ran, carrying bean tears freezing on her cheeks. Shadow stayed by her side. Owen turned, fired once. A shot aimed not to kill but to scatter. Wood splintered from a tree trunk. Shouts erupted. Grayson's men flinched. And in that moment of confusion, Owen moved. Boots crashing through knee-high drifts. He bellowed over the storm. Lena left down the gully. She obeyed without question. Her thin form vanished into the snow-laden trees. Owen followed, but not before glancing back at the house he'd built. The house where his son's laughter once echoed. Now nothing but a trap. He turned away. Behind him, the world burned white. Snow swallowed sound. Each step was a fight. Owen carried Bean, now the boy's body limp against his chest. The child was too cold to cry, and that terrified Owen more than tears. "Stay awake, kid. Just stay awake." Lena led the way. Her arms pumped, her legs burned. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Shadow ran beside her, flanking like a soldier. His breath came hard, fur crusted with ice, but his eyes never left Lena. Behind them, danger followed. Grayson, relentless. The sheriff wasn't shouting orders now. He didn't need to. His men knew. Track, corner, kill if necessary. They weren't chasing children. They were erasing evidence. Grayson moved like a predator. Snow didn't slow him. The weight of guilt never touched him. He wanted Lena and Bean dead, because dead children don't testify. And Owen Miller, he was just collateral. Grayson's voice cut through the trees. "Give them up, Miller." Owen didn't answer. His lungs burned, but his arms tightened around Bean. He wouldn't lose another boy. Not tonight. Not ever. The river. Owen saw it ahead. Frozen. A hazard, but their only hope. Lena. The ice crossed it. She hesitated. It looked too thin. Too cracked. "I can't. You can..." The girl screamed. "I can't lose him." Owen's voice cracked too. "Neither can I." She turned. Ran. Shadow leapt ahead. Onto the ice. It cracked under his weight, but held. Lena followed. Tears streaming. She whispered to her mother. "Please, please, just let us cross." The ice groaned. Splintered. But it didn't break. Not yet. Owen stepped onto it last. Carrying Bean. Every muscle screamed. Every memory of war told him this was madness. But he kept moving. Behind them, Grayson's men emerged. Closer. Rifles raised. Grayson watched coldly. No orders. He wanted Miller to see them coming. Wanted the fear to set in. But then, Shadow stopped. Midway across the ice. Ears up. Eyes forward. He saw them. The men. The rifles. The death coming for the children. And Shadow did what Owen never asked. He turned. And charged. No. Owen's scream was lost to the blizzard. Shadow raced across the snow straight toward the guns. A living shield. Grayson shouted. "Shoot the damn dog." Gunfire cracked. 3 shots. 1 hit. Shadow stumbled. But he didn't fall. Not yet. He kept running. Kept buying seconds. Owen dropped to his knees. Bean clutched against him. Lena's scream tore the night. Shadow, the shepherd, finally collapsed. Hard. The snow stained red. But even as he fell, he looked back, eyes locking with Owen's, and waited. For orders. For forgiveness. For goodbye. Owen's soul splintered. "Move," he roared. At Lena. At himself. At the gods. They ran. Across cracking ice. Away from the gunfire. From the blood. From the old loyal dog who gave them their chance. Bean whimpered. Shadow's name the only word he could remember. And behind them, Shadow lay still, eyes open, watching, until he couldn't. In that moment, Owen Miller wasn't a soldier, wasn't a father, wasn't even a man. He was a broken thing, running, clutching a child who believed in him, while his best friend bled in the snow, and his enemy hunted from behind. And somewhere deep inside his hollow chest, he decided, if they survived this night, he would never run again. At the edge of the forest, where the trees broke into jagged shadows beneath the bleeding sky, Owen Miller waited. Not as a soldier, not as a fugitive, but as something far more dangerous, a man who had finally chosen what he was willing to die for. Across the clearing, Grayson stepped into view. He moved slowly, not cautious, confident. His coat flared behind him like the wings of some cold angel of death. Snow clung to his badge, to his gloves, to the barrel of the rifle in his hands, and his voice, calm, cold. "You're done, Miller." Owen said nothing. His heart pounded like a sledgehammer inside his ribs. Every breath tasted like blood. His body shook from exhaustion and cold. But his hands, steady, because Lena and Bean waited behind him. And this time, he wouldn't fail. Grayson advanced. "You can't outrun me." Owen's voice cracked through the air, sharp as rifle fire. "Not running." Grayson smiled thinly. "Then you're dying." Owen shifted his grip on the rifle. "I've died before." And then, without warning, Grayson fired. Owen dove sideways. Bullets split the air. One tore through his coat. Another carved ice from the trees. Owen rolled gasping, shoulders screaming, but came up on one knee, returning fire. Grayson ducked. Snow exploded. Splinters filled the air. The two men moved like ghosts, shadows weaving between trees and gunfire, each shot echoing like judgment through the frozen silence. Owen wasn't aiming to kill. He was aiming to protect. And Grayson knew it. He pressed forward. Ruthless. Owen's rifle clicked empty. Grayson raised his. And that's when it happened. A blur of gray and blood-stained fur lunged from the tree line. Shadow. The shepherd hurled himself at Grayson's legs, snarling with every ounce of life left in him. Grayson staggered. Shouted. The rifle fired wild. Shadow clamped his jaws onto Grayson's thigh. Blood. A scream. Then Grayson's boot caught Shadow's ribs. A sickening crack. Shadow hit the ground hard. Didn't move. Owen's world stopped. No. He charged. The rifle useless in his hands, now he threw it aside. This wasn't a gunfight anymore. This was survival. He tackled Grayson. Both men crashed into the snow. Fists found flesh. Boots scraped for leverage. Grayson punched Owen's face once. Twice. Blood filled Owen's mouth. But he didn't let go. Didn't fall. Because behind him he heard Lena scream. And that sound became his strength. Owen drove his forehead into Grayson's nose. Bone crunched. Grayson roared. Owen rolled them, came up straddling the sheriff's chest, and rained punches down. Each one a memory. Each one a failure he refused to repeat. For Lena. For Bean. For Shadow. For Tommy. Finally Grayson lay gasping. Broken. Defeated. Owen stood. Chest heaving. Snow steaming from the blood on his skin. Grayson spat red into the snow. You're a coward, Miller. Owen's voice was quieter now. Worse. You're not their father. Grayson's eyes burned. Owen stepped closer and said the words that ended it. You never were. Silence. Only the wind dared move. Owen knelt beside Shadow. The dog's breaths came ragged. Shallow. Owen cradled the old shepherd's head in his lap. Good boy, he whispered. Shadow's tail thumped once, then stilled. Lena sobbed. Bean clung to her. Owen pressed his forehead against Shadow's. Tears fell silently. You saved them. His voice broke. You saved me. The snow fell heavier now, not as a threat, but as a curtain. Owen stood slowly. His arms ached. His ribs screamed, but his heart was steady. He turned to the children, held out his hand. Lena took it. Bean trembling clung to his side, and together they left the sheriff where he lay. Because Owen Miller wasn't running anymore. He was leading. Into the storm. Into the future. With his family. The cabin door creaked open. Owen stepped through first his boots, leaving dark tracks in the snow melt across the floor. His arms trembled from exhaustion, but he didn't stop. Not now. In his arms, Shadow stirred faintly. Blood matted the shepherd's gray coat, but his breathing, shallow and rasping, remained steady. The old dog's head lolled against Owen's chest, as if even consciousness cost more than it was worth. Lena followed, carrying Bean. Both children were silent, hollow-eyed. Lena didn't cry. Bean didn't ask questions. They just stayed close to the only man left who hadn't abandoned them. Owen crossed the room, laid Shadow down beside the hearth. The old dog twitched once, then settled. Owen crouched over him. His voice cracked softer than the fire's first embers. Stay with me. Shadow's ear flicked. A promise. Owen worked fast. He remembered the training cloth heat pressure. Bleeding slowed. Owen's thick hands, built for rifles and fence wires, shook as they stitched the wound. His breath came harsh, uneven, every second longer than the last. Lena watched from across the room, arms locked around Bean. Her voice, small, cracked, whispered the question she'd buried inside since the night began. Is he going to die? Owen didn't answer, because he didn't know. And that was worse than a lie. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, time froze. At last, Owen leaned back, his face pale, his hands crimson, but Shadow still breathed. Lena dared a step closer. She whispered again. What do we do now? Owen's voice was broken glass. We wait. And so they waited. Hours passed. Snow hammered the roof like grief. Owen sat slumped against the wall. Shadow lay stretched beside him. Every rise and fall of his chest a victory. Across the room, Bean curled against Lena, too tired even to cry. But Lena, she watched Owen, not the man, the weight he carried, until she couldn't stand it anymore. She crossed the floor. Slow, careful. And then suddenly, she was there, throwing herself against him, her small arms wrapping tight around his neck. Owen stiffened, didn't know how to breathe. Then he felt it, her tears against his shoulder. Real, raw. And the single word that shattered what was left of his heart. Uncle. Not Owen, not Mr. Miller. Just Uncle. A plea, a promise, a belonging. Owen's arms, slow and shaking, closed around her. He held her, tight. Held the broken little girl who'd crossed a blizzard to find someone who wouldn't let go. He whispered, not knowing if the words were for her or for himself. I've got you. She sobbed harder. And Owen, for the first time in years, let himself break too. Dawn came unnoticed. The fire burned low. The wind had died. And silence, the healing kind, settled over the cabin. Bean woke first. He crawled to the small wooden table in the center of the room, found a stub of pencil, a scrap of paper, and began to draw. Not for anyone, just because he needed to remember something good. Owen slept sitting up, his arms around Lena. Shadow lay unmoving but alive, his breathing steadier. Bean finished the drawing. He stood, crossed the room on small, careful feet, and set the paper down, in the center of the table, where everyone would see it when they woke. A single picture, a house, a tree, a sun, and 4 figures, a man, a girl, a boy, and a dog. Above it, written in shaky child scrawl, my family. When Owen woke, his body ached. Every scar, every break, every regret burned inside him. But something was different. The air smelled warm. The silence felt soft. And Lena's head rested against his chest. Peace. He looked across the room, saw the drawing, saw Bean watching him. Owen's voice cracked. Come here, kid. Bean didn't hesitate. He crossed the floor, curled into Owen's other side. And Owen, for the first time since his son's death, held 2 children in his arms. Alive, safe, his family, chosen, not by blood, but by love. Beside him, Shadow stirred, a low rattling sigh. Owen turned. The old shepherd opened one eye. Just one, but it was enough. Owen let out a laugh that broke halfway to tears. Stubborn old bastard. Shadow's tail thumped once. Lena stirred, saw, smiled. Being cheered softly, and Owen whispered, raw and broken, "Welcome home." Later that morning, Owen stood outside, hammer in hand, nails gripped between his teeth. He worked in silence, fixing the porch, the broken shutters, the cracked door frame. Each swing of the hammer drove grief deeper into the frozen ground. Each repair rebuilt more than wood. Inside the cabin, Lena fed the fire. Bean played quietly on the floor, and Shadow slept by the hearth. Whole, the house smelled of bread, of safety, of family, of healing. Owen looked up at the mountains beyond. The snow was melting. He swallowed hard, then turned back to his work, because there was a home to build, and finally someone to build it for. The official letter arrived on a quiet morning. No sirens, no threats, no shadows in the trees. Just Deputy Price alone this time. He stood awkwardly at the porch's edge, boots, thick with thawing snow, holding the envelope like it might burn through his gloves. Owen Miller opened the door before the man could knock. Price didn't meet his eyes. Court signed it this morning. Owen said nothing. Price cleared his throat. You're their guardian now, legally. He hesitated, then softer, almost human. They're yours. Owen took the envelope, felt its weight, and nodded once. Price retreated without another word. When the truck's engine finally faded into silence, Owen just stood there, staring at the paper in his hand, like he couldn't believe the fight was over. Not the real one. Not the one that mattered. Behind him, Lena's voice was quiet. What is it? Owen turned, looked at her, at Bean, at Shadow stretched near the hearth, breathing steady, eyes half closed in peace. It's done. Lena frowned. What's done? Owen's throat worked. He forced the words out. You're home. That evening, the cabin glowed like a lantern in the dark. Warm light spilled from the windows. Fire crackled in the hearth. The air smelled of pine bread and something older hope. Lena and Bean played outside in the softening snow. Spring crept down from the mountains. The ice was breaking. Shadow followed them slowly, his limp visible but his tail high. Every step was a small victory, every breath a quiet miracle. Bean threw a snowball. Missed. Lena laughed for the first time in days that didn't taste like sorrow. Shadow barked once sharp and clear, the sound splitting the soft twilight like a starting bell. Owen watched from the porch, silent, grateful, whole. Later, as the sun sank behind the peaks, he worked quietly by the shed. His hands were steady as he carved. The wood wasn't fine, but the letters mattered. When the sign was finished, he carried it to the porch, set it down, ran his rough fingers over the grain, and smiled. The Carter home, not Miller, not anything else, because some names carry too much grief, and some names deserve to begin again. Owen hammered the sign into the post by the gate as dusk fell. A promise, a declaration, a new chapter. Behind him, Lena stood at the doorway, arms around Bean, silent, watching, belonging. Shadow sat beside them, ears forward, tail sweeping softly through melting snow. The air held its breath. Then slowly the old shepherd lifted his head, eyes catching the last gold light of the dying sun. The camera lingered, drew closer, closer, until all that filled the frame were those eyes, old, scarred, and endless. Not just a dog, a witness, a guardian, a miracle remade. Owen's voice, soft, steady, broke the silence. Come home, boy. Shadow blinked and obeyed. Behind him, the porch light burned against the dark. And for the first time, it felt like enough. The screen faded to black, but the warmth remained.